Should Christians pay iLobolo? Last week we concluded that lobolo in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is one of those cultural customs that can be redeemed to be done in a way that glorifies God. And today we're looking at how do we do it in a way that glorifies God. Hello and welcome to Context. If this is your first time here, thank you for joining us. And if you enjoy this episode, please consider subscribing, hit the like button, and also click on the notification bell so that you don't miss out on Context. And I trust that you're going to enjoy this time with us, and we're going to have a good time learning and equipping so that we can live our best life for Jesus in our South African context. And back again, we have Sihle, who beautifully served us well last week, helping us to undo some of the distortions of culture and reminding us what does iLobolo look like, done in a way that glorifies God. So last week we spent a lot of time just unpacking what are those distortions. We were talking about how the economy or the economics of iLobolo has been corrupted, where it's no longer the focus is no longer on building relationships, but rather it's more on the economics. Can you afford? How much is my daughter? You know, the fact that she's a doctor, she's a qualified nurse, or whatever the profession is has been now made to be something that has bearing.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, what your daughter does, it has now distorted the actual original goal of building relationships. And that's what we're going to be looking at today and say, how do we go back to that original goal of building relationships and do it in such a way that glorifies God? And maybe one of the other things that we will chuck in there is the whole element of ancestral worship, where now also the ancestral worship part of things is infused into the process. How do we navigate those treacherous waters? And again, I've got Sihle with you. And again, Sihle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So good to be back here. And just to continue with the conversation, we are all learning and we are all growing. And it's wonderful to be back here again as we continue on our topic. I remember last week ended up, I left you guys there
with the three cows.
With the three cows. And I could imagine you were like saying, yes, thank you, Lord, for the breakthrough. It's all about the three cows. I want no distortion around that. So I want us to really pick it up from there, where we look at the reality of iLobolo. Just fixing my glass there. My glasses, and then just the reality of what iLobolo is all about. And we have said is an expression of a desire to start a marital relationship. It's a growth of a love, from one level, things are going into the next level. It's an invitation to the society, to the family and friends close by to say, come, look at what true love is about. Look at the transformation that Christ has brought in us, because as we date, in a dating setup, you are building your relationship from a place of you wanting to please God, but you are doing that in a cultural. You are doing that not out of humans' space. You are on earth, and then there are processes that are there and designed to help you and I to transition into the next phase of this invitation to everyone else. So it's an expression of a desire. You are knocking at the parents' door. Maybe I need to say this. In the Western culture, a young man will go directly to the father of his fiancé or bride-to-be and ask a hand in marriage. But in an African context, it's almost like going indirect, where you're going back to your authority. You are denoting that you are under parental authority. and then you are going through your parents, and then your parents are peers of the parents of the lady, abalingani. So authority-wise,
Yes.
there is that equality there. So in our context, it's almost like now you give your parents to take that room. It's not to say that the Western is wrong, because the father of the boy will still say, did you speak to, how did it go? Did you speak to the father of your girlfriend? How did it go? Do you have his blessings? And then, so it's a different expression, but we are just concentrating here in our space here. So things then graduate into that space now where you want to marry this lady. So before there was this 11 cow principle, the 10th one, have you ever asked yourself, how do this nation and that nation get into that specific number? You know, that number 11, you know, it's an odd number. How did we get it there? We wish Sir Theophilus was here with us to help us navigate that, but with his crew, they got to that number. But before him, the most important, according to Reggie Kumalo, the late from Ulundi, cultural commentator, expert, would then say there were 3 very much important cows.
Sure.
That once you give those, and almost like the language will even change in the house, Bari, brother-in-law. So culturally, you are seen as married. Now you go to church, you are still kind of like, are you married? Are you not married? And then there's a confusion there now. Do I move in? Don't I move in? And so many are in that space right now because they feel that they've done everything but, you know, wearing a white dress and walking down the aisle. Whereas the main thing that is just missing there is declaration of vows, you know, because I've already indicated that, so I don't want to go much into the details of that. But just a nutshell, the declaration that is missing is that for the two of you as a couple to say your vows, and then that's it. Why? Because at some stage the culture just got to assume that a lady understood what it means to be a wife, or a guy understood what it means to be a husband, because they saw the culture, the community, the village in which they live, how things are done. But we are not in that setting anymore. Assumptions cannot take us further now. We have to hear what is it that people are promising each other and then support them into that. So those 3 cows now, one was a cow to honor the father, the one was for the mother, the one was for a lady, you know, it then gets slaughtered. One half, as far as I can remember, would go into the family of the family of the bride and of the groom, and then vice versa. It's almost like cutting the covenant there.
Sure.
Now, when you cut a covenant, you cut the animal in halves,
Sure.
and then the imagination is that there is a flow of the blood between the halves. And then the people who are making promises, vows to each other, entering the covenant, will obviously say whatever their promises that they are making to each other. In the process, they are implicitly saying, I would rather die like this animal than to break the vow that I'm making to you.
Sure, sure.
Then they
That's
begin to walk in between these two halves in terms of the covenantal understanding, back, even in the Hebrew understanding of things. So the idea of that, of the forming of that covenant now, is that now as you become related by blood, because you now walk in the flow of the blood, this it makes you one. You are of the same blood now. You are related by the blood now. That's why even in our Christian faith, Jesus being the Lamb of God, we are of the same blood. His blood, as the song goes, runs in my veins, runs in our veins. He's our big brother. He's not only our Lord, he's not only the God the Son, but he's also our brother in that sense. So just to borrow from that covenantal understanding of things. So that's what the third cow would do. I think they call it umncamiso for in Zulu. I don't know in other language what do they call it, but it's generally the same, different expression. And then it does then not mean that you wouldn't add maybe 1 or 2 cows, because the question is, it's not about what you pay, it's about what you offer. It's about what, out of negotiations, you are allowed to actually offer here. Maybe some will say 7 cows.
Sure.
Maybe some will say maybe 8. Maybe others, based on negotiations, 5 cows. And again, unlike today, which is a distortion, if you are talking about buying an actual cow now and say you are bringing that to Shawelo, Soweto, Katlehong, Togoza, or Soshanguve, or Munsu, Tembisa, wherever you are, or you might be, the amount, the price for the cattle in their understanding was not the same.
Sure.
So you can't pay the same amount for the calf as the same, and pay the same amount for this cow that has probably given birth 5 times and then is an older cow. So the older cow, there's a sense of depreciation there. So instead of paying, say, 7,000, you might as well pay 4,000. You might as well pay 8,000. You don't know, but it's never the same. The moment you hear people say, it's 7 times 11,
Sure.
or it's 10 times 11, then you know that there is another distortion there.
Sure.
And that distortion comes, is driven, again, with what I've said, the whole thing of buying, which is not really biblical. You're not buying, you're building a relationship.
So if you're planning on getting iLobolo, please get your uncle to watch this podcast and just to empower him when he gets to the negotiation table. He can say, "Hey, cut it down to 3, not 7."
Yeah. So you say you first, in terms of even how you my suggestion, my proposal is that you don't say how much do we pay for Sibongile. You talk about as we are asking Sibongile's hand in marriage on behalf of our son, how do we do it here in terms of what can we offer the family to as a gift? What gift can the family accept here? And then they will say 10 cows.
Sure.
Now, if they say 10 cows or they say 7 cows or however many cows, then the question is, how much is the value now of the cow? A calf and an ox can never be charged at the same level. The cows in the the pens, the kraal is not the same. You can't just find these 3-year-old calves here. No, you can't. And then exactly the same, you can't. So there's got to be a variation. That's where negotiation then come in. And then you can find yourself paying a smaller amount here. And then in terms of, if you use the monetary language now, not in a sense of buying, but to represent the cow, it cannot be the same amount. So in my view, it can't just be this, 10 times, 10,000 times 11, just like it's not the same. So you negotiate on the basis of that by changing the language and focusing on talking about the cow. How much is your cow? Because we're going to equate that in terms of monetary value. We're going to pay and give it in the form of money. So there's going to be a variation then, But because we have lost this understanding that even buy 3 cows, and then that's it. It can be, they can be married. We have now created our own standard. Everything 15,000, 7,000, and that's not true. All right.
So-
So
so-
lobola was not, just to complete this line, was not that complicated or expensive in a sense. What has made it even much more expensive is what was or not original part of iLobolo, which is izibizo, maybe a subject then for another day, which started as a game, as the ladies would be sending those private messages through a letter to the groom to be, to say, hey, when you come back, buy us a duke or buy us a apron or something like that. But it's kind of like, it was like a game, and which guys could easily meet back in the days and blah blah. Let me not say it's blah blah blah.
It's okay, blah blah fish paste. No. I think it's good, and I think so. For me, I think the question then is that when we say one, you're saying it's a covenant,
Yeah.
and in the other aspect, it is a gift. Now, there's two things there. The one, when we talk about the covenant, if it's a covenant, why doesn't it get now? Because a covenant implies that it has to be killed, right? So, and the expectation then, if it's given in lieu of a covenant, then why then do we have, for one, cows that are still alive? It's type of thing. I think that's the first aspect of the question. How do we explain that? And I think the second part is, if it's a gift again, why are we negotiating? If it's a gift, shouldn't it be out of the free will offering, saying, hey, this is what I want to give?
Yeah, that's a very valid question, because a gift comes from the heart, meaning that you can even say, 5 cows or
I've actually got
12
more. I'll give you the 12 cows.
But I've got more. I can even bless you more.
Yes, yeah.
And stuff like that. There is a part, it's about honoring. There's a part where you want to meet the family at the level where they also feel honored.
Sure.
The family, the parents who are there, you want to kind of like be at peace with them as far as possible, as it depends unto you. So
Sure.
you don't want to complicate it there. So I can kind of like maybe pack that one there. That it's again attached to honoring.
Sure.
In my view. So you want to meet them at the level where there is a degree of satisfaction in terms of feeling honored, so to speak. Yeah.
Sure. And then the other element, where if it's a covenant, why then do you, which you only are there certain cows within the 3 which are for the covenant, or all of them are for the covenant?
You know what? So I don't want to get too deep, because in different, as you were saying, in different regions, things are done differently. And again, it's part of diversity,
Sure.
and that's fine, and that's okay, because the goal is to build a relationship. Well, that is an explanation associated with those 3 cows, and
Sure.
once again, that was the practice. By covenant, I just felt to, because that picture of even slaughtering is for celebration, and it's almost like saying farewell. You've been great, and we now kind of like release you in that space. And that picture for me evoked the how covenant used to be cut.
Sure.
In the part, because now we are redeeming things here, and then choosing to see them also a certain way that will not take away from the beauty of building relationships and marriages that would really last. I know I'm not answering your questions in a satisfying way. However, maybe the key thing is just to highlight that the value of those 3 cows, and then to say the rest is actually given to the family. It's amazing how Christians also, there are Christians who also just negotiate among themselves and say, listen, we've known each other for years, and let's let our kids just do this thing. Whatever they want to give it to us, we give it to them. And then, so we're going to support them. There are parents like that. And then it still look beautiful. But the other parents as well, they will take it. Funny enough, they will reinvest it back into this thing again. And you understand? So the people are doing these things in different way. But the point is, there were those three main important cows that had to be prioritized on. And again, they are not equally in value. And then there could then be addition, as the family would then say, back into the question now of gift, would then say, look, men, we're not here to extort your family of, their livelihood here. You are a fine young man. We like you and we welcome you. What have you got?
Sure.
Or someone will say, well, this is just go for 11 or for 7 and stuff like that. Then you can debate around the value now of the cow in terms of the amount it cost. And then that's where now you understand, okay, this of these 7 cows, this one is, I'm making an example, 3,000, this one is 8,000, this one is, then when it comes together, you can see that, oh, okay, I can breathe here. It will not take me 20 years to save up for this. This is now practical.
Yeah.
They are making it possible. They are not making it cumbersome and difficult for the young people to get married. And then, then that's that. And again, it's I said earlier on last week that the dream to get married belongs to Kosingabo, the couple.
Sure.
So they are the one that needs to, in a sense, indirectly disciple their parents, use their influence to say, we don't want to start on a back foot.
Sure.
Because everything is on us. And then and then so they are also part of this whole process. They might not be sitting there during the negotiation, because they will come at the end and be introduced that let's see these people now together and celebrate them, and then their time now to thank everybody who've been part of the whole process. But it must not be lost in the details that it's honoring after the desire to be married is being blessed by the parents. They are saying go for it. It's then expressing that gratitude to say, come look at us, we're doing this thing together, pray with us and encourage us. I'm not rejecting you to say you are completely have no meaning in my life, but pray that as we become this family, that we will be a family built on a sure foundation that cannot be destroyed by any storm that will come our way. Yeah.
Sure, that's good, and that's good. And I love the fact that you are saying it is on us, and I want us to do some heart contextual application. When I say heart, I'm trying to just say, a lot of parents that are watching this, we are also parents as we speak, and my daughters are growing up, your daughters are growing up.
Yes.
You just recently were blessed with a daughter 3 weeks ago.
The 4th one.
And I do believe as this generation, we have to set things straight. For the sake of loving God and loving our neighbors within our context.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that I think we have not reckoned with is the whole thing that we have a situation where obviously colonialism happened. And one of the things that usually we talk about the loss of land. The loss of land, as real as it is, there is also the loss, one, which goes with it, the loss of cultural expression, which is contextual, but also it was a loss of cattle. A lot of cattle and a lot of iLobolo
economy.
The economy of iLobolo was based on cattle. It was based on the fact that kunenkomo esibayeni and ziyaphuma, as you are saying, it's on us. And usually it was songs utumalumu zobazohamba bayongilobolela, and it's more like the uncles and the adults of the home took it upon themselves to say, we are going to bridge the gap. We are going to say we are coming from a solid family. This boy that is coming to like ask for your daughter in marriage, they are not just a boy who
It's an orphan.
It's just
No
an
one.
orphan, and not to, again, this is not, it is not discriminating against an orphan.
Yes, yes,
and
absolutely.
I think it's very important that we mention that what we are trying to say, again, if you understand Ubuntu is saying, whether
Actually, there's no orphan. There are no orphans in that
absolutely,
context.
in that context,
because you adopt every child.
Absolutely, the whole village takes care of the child, and within families, uncles, aunts, grannies, as long as there's members and there's people, there is no child that's going to be an orphan within our village.
Yes.
So again, when we use that term, we need to contextualize it, because where we are now, there are real orphans who cannot point at anyone who will say, I take up ownership of raising that child. And so within that context, you would not have orphans in the strict sense as you do have now. But again, back to the point is that they are saying this child has been raised well.
Yes.
We are here saying we are representing, and we can vouch for his character, and your daughter is going to be in good hands. And if anything goes wrong, we are all there, to try and help augment where things are going wrong. And now it then says, so they take care of the economic part of it. They take care of giving. They take care of giving the iLobolo, which obviously at this stage that is not the case. And where I'm going with this is that as this new generation coming in and saying we need to get the hearts applied right. When we understand that the fact that the people at this stage, we have issues of fatherlessness. Parents don't have cows anymore, and that type of a thing. The
Unemployment is high.
Unemployment is very high. Now, what do we say in the context where you don't have the uncles that can do iLobolo for you? You don't have isbaya, ekaya. There are no cows at home, right? And so, as you were alluding to it last week, the fact that now the couples of today have to go and borrow money, get themselves into debt. You launch off in debt so that you can get married. Because now, when we're talking about the honor, it has to go both ways, where he says, the reason the culture is there, it's so that we can usher in the next generation on a good footing. The way it is at this moment, where it's like, you, my boy, go and iLobolo. No, it's no longer the uncles. It's no longer the fathers. And now it's on the couple, because whether the boy goes or not, I mean, we've seen stories, and not stories, and we know people where even the girl, they also go to the bank and they borrow money.
To lobola themselves.
To lobola themselves. They borrow the husband. Whether that happens or not, the point being, the husband is going to be in debt, or both of them are going to be in debt. If the husband is in debt, therefore, other things are being impacted in the home. They cannot provide the way they ought to. And one of the key issues within marriages is when couples are in debt and all sorts of things. It's one of the catalysts of broken marriages, where there's financial pressures, there's dreams that cannot be realized simply because the couple has already started off in debt. Now, it speaks to the broader aspect of Ubuntu. Now, one, have we lost sight of Ubuntu? Do we understand Ubuntu, or we only know Ubuntu when Barack Obama comes here at the Wanderers Stadium and quotes it back to us? Like, this thing of Ubuntu is a good thing.
Yes,
Have we lost sight of it? Because I think where I'm sitting, I look at how iLobolo is being done, and the guys even in Tembisa, that's why they asked for this, is that so many people have been bruised and wounded by this. So much pain, has been felt by so many people who loved each other. But it's almost like there's just a spiritual attack that rises up like a tidal wave when couples want to get married, where honor is thrown out the window. The whole goal of trying to build relationships is out the window. And the couple suffer in the process, to the point that they have to live years, in a broken foundation. Because the parents or omalume have lost the sense of Ubuntu. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse. And then one is, have we lost sight of Ubuntu? And Yeah, and number two, what can we do to try and restore that vision? Because if we restore that vision, it will help us be responsive in a way that is contextual, that is applicable to the current challenges that are faced by people intending on getting married.
Yeah. There is no way we can outsource our responsibility of hearing God's voice.
Sure.
As Christians, we have this open door, this blank check that God says, come to me. You know, all of you who are, how does Jeremiah 33 verse 3 puts it? It says, call unto me and I will answer you and I will show you great and mighty things. Elsewhere in James chapter 1 verse 5 and 6, it says, does anyone amongst you lacks wisdom? Let him ask. So there is so much of in store for us, but we must not exclude ubunkulunkulu in Ubuntu. You know, I'm talking about now that relationship with the Lord where you hear for yourself the voice of God to say, God, here is my context. Here is what your word is saying. And what are you saying to me right now facing this obstacle? We must not be afraid of inviting God in our circumstances, in our situations, and then ask him to give us wisdom. It's amazing how people are testifying how when they were at the crossroads, not knowing what to do, what word to say, and they just waited on the Lord.
Sure.
And then God just gave them something, says, do this, talk to so and so. I've got something for you there, do this and that. Because this is about us. Remember, earlier last week I said we want to be like Jesus. Jesus comes and says, you have heard it said. That's an oral tradition.
Sure.
Things passed on from one generation to generation. But I say this now. I am taking you back to the originality of things so that, as Miles Monroe would say, purpose for your relationship, for your marriage will not be destroyed or abused because of ignorance. And you will be connected into that. So we cannot, I think it's a common error when we are going through tough times. We are like a young student in class battling with mathematics. Instead of going to the teacher and say, teacher, I'm struggling here, he keeps quiet and then he goes home and then try to figure this thing out on his own, and he tries and tries. But the teacher is available to coach, is available for a relationship. So the Holy Spirit is our teacher. You know, he makes Christ real to us. He makes his voice real to us. And so sometimes we want to be religious, yet God is not religious. He is a real God. He really came, he really died, he really lived so that we can tap into the inheritance that he has in store for us, the blessing that he has in store for us. So we have a responsibility as Christians, wanting to honor God even in how we do dating, iLobolo, and all of those things, to include God in the journey of this relationship. Not only our parents, not only, the pastors, but to be intentional about inviting God in prayer. And God will speak into that. So I do wish there was a cookie cutter to say, Ebony Park or Munsu or Soweto, everything is the same for you. You are going to face different parents, perhaps who are atheists, maybe who don't believe in God like you do. What do you do there? I cannot give you that answer. Sure. Your relationship will be your revelational light into that space where you are at. You are in a person where the family says, no, in this home, we do things this way in a manner that you feel like it's going against the will of God. Once again, right there, you do not reject your responsibility to hear what God is saying. If things get tough, you retreat like Jesus in a quiet place. And
Sure.
all you say, you just
That's
say,
good.
Lord, so what? I've done this with a good motive to honor you, to honor the process, but this is the feedback. How do you want me to respond here? I tell you, God will not have you go against his word. Number one, God will not have you go it alone.
Sure.
He will provide for you discernment and wisdom that you need in the situation. So that would be I think maybe just my biggest advice. Don't outsource your responsibility to hear from God.
Sure.
God is passionate. His ears attentive to you and I. He wants to hear from us, but he is also inviting us to hear from him. John 8 verse 47 or verse 49, it says, those who belong to God hear the voice of God. So as a Christian, navigating these relational maze, or difficult spaces, invite the Lord.
Sure.
And then he will guide you. In that way, what you will discover is that you are molding the culture. And then other people will come after you and says, I'm inspired by you. And then it become a wonderful culture. It's redeemed now. But that redemption is never outside the realm of a relationship with God and hearing what he wants to say in this space. So, what is the Lord said about your relationship? If God orders a pizza for you, he never has you pay for that pizza. He's going to pay for it. So if you include him in that relationship and you've got a promise of God in that relationship, God will align things in your favor. And who knows, you might end up by your conduct winning the behavior of those around you who might not even know what it means to be in a relationship
Sure.
with the Lord. So that is my chief advice. Don't, Don't outsource your responsibility to hear God.
Sure.
The children of Israelites, when God wanted to speak with them, they said in Exodus, no, don't speak to us directly. Speak to Moses. You know what they were doing? They were abdicating their responsibility to hear from God, and then religion then thrives and people get ahead because of the misuse of the wrong use or application of the principles that God wants us to use in building the house of a marriage or family relationships. You see, so that would be long, and the short of it from my side. Don't let me repeat that again. Don't you ever outsource your responsibility to hear God's voice for yourself. You are unemployed, you want to get married. Where is that desire coming from?
Sure.
Okay, I don't have all of these things, but I have a desire to get married, and I like this lady. Bring that before the Lord. If he orders the pizza, he will pray for it. Remember, God is your Father. He will provide for you. It might not through the way that you desire. So your great advantage here is to walk with the Lord.
Sure.
Very close, and then he will provide for you what you need. I know what I'm saying, and many people have testimonies of how God has come through for them when they had nothing. Some people started really not even having a bed to sleep on, and they started very small. But because they put God first in everything that they were pursuing, then God came through for them. And I just want to encourage you to put God first, and all these things shall then be added unto you. Don't walk by sight. Don't walk by what is happening around. Ecclesiastes 11 says, he who watches over the winds will not sow. Don't let these circumstances around you distract you, but just says, God, this is my reality. What are you saying to me? Obedience will then unlock your breakthrough. Then you will testify and say, God came through. And I have no doubt he will come through for you, irrespective of your situation. So don't give up. You have a competitive advantage. God is with you, and he is your father, and who can do lobola for you and provide for you. And also give you all that will sustain you after that. It all comes from him. Does this sound super spiritual? No. God is not super spiritual, so we are not super spiritual. We are speaking from experience. He is our Father. And then if we come to him through Jesus, he will give you wisdom, and then we will know what road to take even in these times. And by that, you are shining in your community. You are beginning to mold the culture, because people who despised you now have nothing to say, because they can see the hand of God upon you. My goodness, there's going to be testimony of God's breakthroughs and goodness as you put him first in your relationship, whether it's just a pure friendship, no romance, whether it's a romantic relationship. Include him right there in the beginning. Don't wait to include him when it's lobola time, when it's tough. No, don't be a 9-1 Christian who only goes to God when there's emergency. Include him right from the beginning going forward. And I think I can never emphasize that enough. Never outsource your responsibility to hear God. You are not working, God can speak into that and tell you what to do. He's your sustainer. People are not.
Sure. That's good. He's your sustainer. People are not. And I think the next question though is that now when we talk about, let's say, for example, now, I mean, from a cultural sense, or from a point of view where culture doesn't align with reality, and there are guys who have now decided, you know what, forget about this whole thing. I'm going to just fat and sit. Or maybe before we get to the fat and sit, guys, would you say the way that iLobolo is being currently executed at this moment, it is optimized to be pro-people? Ukuthi kungcono ngintshontshe, let me rather do it and ask for forgiveness. In other words, ngizoyikhokha inhlawulo because I can afford inhlawulo. I can afford the fine, as it were, that if you impregnate somebody's daughter, you go to their family and omalume, they just pay imbuzi, a goat or whatnot, and that appears to be easier than doing things through the front door.
That is the most expensive part. You cannot afford that lifestyle. The devastating effects over years in your marriage, the erosion of trust over years in your marriage, you cannot afford that. It does in the eye look like it's good, but there are things that looks great in the eye, but the end is not that good. And so I know that it appears that way, but actually you cannot afford to do that. If you are already cohabiting, some people, they don't know these things. They just think it's a way of life because they grew up seeing this thing, and naturally they kind of like follow suit and stuff like that. But that is more costly. And my pastor says that when he's talking about cohabitation and things like that, that when you do that, it's on your account. And it is very expensive. You can't afford that.
No, even I agree. And I think and think listeners would be agreeing as well. But I'm just saying, on the element of the way it's being done at a pervasive level, is it encouraging that behavior? Be that as it may, it's a wrong behavior.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
because I'm just speaking to the parents, at this level, that if your disposition is to put these hurdles in the way of people getting married through the front door, aren't you creating a situation that we are experiencing of a high fatherlessness rate, where people go and do a fat and sit knowing that, and some of them are not even saved, or not believers, they're not followers of Jesus Christ. And so they do this and say, you know what, I would rather just go and do it the back door because I have no money for lobolo.
Sadly so. It encourages people to do it their own way, and no matter the cost, no matter the price, and it's an inadvertent consequence of making things complicated. Parents are not supposed to make things complicated for their children. They are there to guide and to help in a right way.
Sure.
But if they make it difficult, then implicitly they might be even feeding that whole thing of, you know what, I'm over 18. The Constitution allows me to make my own decisions. I've tried to get you guys on board, but you are complicating things. Let me just do it my way. And sadly, it ends up most of the people getting there, and that is an unfortunate part. So I do making it so commercialized and so expensive. It's beyond reach the common guy, and therefore it discourages and it frustrates, and you feel like you are not man enough because suddenly you understand you can't be seen to be able to provide and to do this and this and that, because we are not in different stages of life, and then so that is a sad part and
consequence of the whole thing.
The whole thing.
And it just reminds me.
It's painful.
And it reminds me of a friend of mine who made a decision. They made it many years ago.
Sure.
And so he wanted to do things the right way. And he went and he approached, and the asking price again was a lot, was beyond. Again, this whole thing of distortion, where the hurdle was so high that they could not meet it. And so, he got to a point where he's like, you know what, we're going to go ahead and do the right thing, and we're going to get married, with or without your approval, but we are begging for your blessings, but we can't have your blessing, so we're going to go ahead instead, and rather than doing the fat and sit and doing things the wrong way. So they decided they are going to go ahead and get married. But the sister of the wife, on the one hand, did not do that. And so what they did, they just decided to, fat and sit, and the guy paid iLobolo or whatever the case is. But the rift that was in the family, he was seen, he was ostracized. They were ostracized. Raised their kids in a stable home, and the other daughter just went and stayed in a 2-room somewhere, but then they accepted the guy who actually went through the back door. This guy who came through the front door and asked and came and said, I'm a responsible guy. I'm not here just to shack up. I want to do things the right way and get married. He was pushed to the side. Or not pushed, but there was a rejection, like an out and out rejection. And I think for me then it brings the question then, is there something even beyond just the physical, at a spiritual level, where the enemy is in opposition to marriages, that unchecked, uses even things like iLobolo and people's unrealistic demands and the distortions thereof as a vehicle to perpetuate social destruction in getting kids, like just fathers not being around, like the fat and sit situation, and by extension, obviously perpetuating poverty and so on and so on. Is
ripple effects.
Is the distortions of iLobolo being used by the enemy in a way that is destructive to society?
He to start with, he does not have anything. He just take the truth and twist it.
Sure.
That's a distortion. That's a lie. Just twist it, and then he presents it in an appealing way to say, do it this way, do it your way. It's gonna go well with you, but he knows that's not gonna go well with you.
Sure.
It's a trap. So yes, Satan is anti anything that is from the kingdom of God, and the culture around us seems to also hate marriage. It's just easy to just say, throw this thing away. The modeling of marriage, even when you look on the television, Hollywood does not do it. So everything is just against marriage, and that makes it so challenging. And then there comes this person wanting to do the right things, got a heart of honoring, but pushed away or not responded to in a right way. And that's where maturity needs to come in again, where you just bring that whole thing to the Lord. Lord, what do I do with this? Among other things, that may include forgiveness, even if they don't ask, because they do not know the damage they are causing in so doing, in so behaving, and just release that forgiveness in that situation. For a child of God, everything is centered around the relationship with our Heavenly Father. By the way, we've got to have this compassionate heart and not come from a paternalistic point of view over our families. This is a journey of grace. We are not born again or believers because we were smart enough. But we've got to have to understand that out of brokenness, people can break others. Some people, not because they are evil or they are ugly, it's just because there is a level of brokenness. Jesus says, if you, as evil as you are, fathers, know how to give what is good to your children, Luke 11, verse 11 and 12, how much more will your Heavenly Father give you good things if you ask? You see, condition there, humility, all the time. And where you just say, Lord, I don't know in the sense what to do, but definitely what you are saying is the enemy trying to misuse this to actually say, his sermon is to say to God, you see, your kingdom way of honoring does not work here. Now, Jesus demonstrated that the kingdom way works. But the Satan always wants to challenge that through accusations, condemnation, and through distortion of facts, and says, look, this is not the right way and stuff like that. But as we choose to honor the Lord in every circumstance where we do life, to say, Lord, speak to me, I am listening. It's amazing how God makes the way where there is no way. What does Jesus say? It is written. And by appealing to the word of God, Jesus triumphed over his tricks and over his lies. So Jesus goes back to the saying of God, the word of God, the voice of God, to actually overcome the very same enemy. We want to be like Jesus in every way. So we have to emulate him even in that opposition, until that opposition become our opportunity to actually be the display of God's glory and beauty in how we relate with each other. Loving those who are not for us, those who demonstrate hatred towards us. It says we are blessed. God says we are blessed. It's a blessing of insult, being insulted. But God says, I'm blessing you because you are responding in a manner that allows me to work in the situation, to work out and to bring out the good. With the passage of time, you'll find that the Lord does something supernatural to those parents, and there's a restoration. But that restoration, which is a heart of salvation, also does not come outside the realm of listening to what God is saying.
Sure.
Christianity is a relationship with God. And everything that we do, we want to hear what he says and do it. And that is his love language, my friend says. It's his obedience is God's love language. When we do what he asks us to do, faith in action, it pleases him. And he moves on our behalf because we are trusting him. So that is what for a child of God in those situations, because you see that in a church, what is happening outside, we see also a church and the cost of living making things difficult for people. In that space, wait and hear what the Lord will say to you, and let that gives you peace and perspective and breakthrough going forward. So in that way, when you look at the two, that picture speaks deeply. This one tried to do the right thing. This one went through the back door. Look what the enemy is saying. He's saying, this is good. This is good. And therefore let everybody emulate that and do that which is against the will of God. But that's a trap. That is a trap down the line. So this one, who may be identifying You may be identifying with the first couple who does everything right, but still you are being pushed away. Continue to wait on the Lord for his wisdom to shine in that space. And when God speaks to you, things change, and his word is creative. It creates a new reality for you. And don't be distracted to say, oh, they look successful, and therefore God must be blessing them. It could be just a counterfeit to get you distracted. Keep your eyes on him and seek to become like Jesus. What would Jesus do? You remember that in that situation, if it was him being rejected in that way. And
Sure, yeah, that's good. And I think our last question would be, now this whole thing of honor, there's the law in our country, and when you say honoring to parents, there's the law of the land, there's also obedience to Christ. And we agree that the obedience to Christ must always be above everything. And I think the question that somebody listening to this may be asking is this: now, I am white and I want to marry into a Xhosa family, or I am Sotho and I want to marry into a Zulu family. And I do believe this is from God. This marriage, I've got a strong sense of conviction. But the family that I'm going to, they are saying point blank, we will not let a white person marry, or an Indian person marry into this home, or a Xhosa or a Pedi or a Zulu person marry into this home. And so we are drawing a line in the sand. That's not going to happen. I feel a sense that God wants me to get married to this person. But the family, on the basis of my ethnicity, they are saying that they will not accept me marrying them. So how do you balance that honor, that conviction from God, but also the legal parts where actually you are two adults who can actually go before the court of law and be able to execute on what you believe God has convicted you to do?
Yeah, those are set reality, and once again, well explained. And the picture of that parent, of that person saying, no, not in this culture, not this race in this culture. Well, that is a voice of a brokenness. This is a voice of someone who's been hurt.
Yeah.
Compassion is key on our part. May you break us, O God, break our hearts with the thing that breaks your heart.
Sure.
You've got to have, that's what I'm saying, compassion for them.
Sure.
Discern, that's not them. They are great people, but they've been hurt by particular experiences. They said, hurt people hurt others.
Sure.
So see beyond what meets the eye, and still be a good ambassador that gives feedback into the government, if I use that illustration of saying, this is my circumstance. And that calls for discipline, that calls for slowing down, and waiting on God, and engaging, and crying, and wiping of tears, and waiting on God. Again, as I've said, you cannot, you can't really outsource that responsibility of engaging with Him in this particular space. There are many people who have gone through that, but it's amazing how the testing of their faith, sometimes things like that come as a test as well. Are you willing really to stand up and to die for what the Lord, this thing that the Lord has this gift that the Lord has given you? And then you would see others pass the test by dependence unto the Lord, by their humility unto the Lord. And later on, that test becomes a testimony. I've seen that, and then I can't help but glorify God. Even if someone came from the same culture, you also have those situations that says, your child can never marry my child, and that animosity is there. Again, what is happening here? Don't just react emotionally. Wait a minute, what is happening here? This is the hurting person, and then unintentionally seeking to hurt me now because they are hurt. And then so in that space, if we are speaking to each other as Christians here, once again, the first thing that we've got to have is compassion. It's a heart of compassion.
Sure.
Because this person is hurting. There are many people who hurt us just because they were hurt themselves.
Sure.
You know, we mingle with them at church. We are walking the same journey at church, because the beauty of walking together as a community of believers is that while we deal with our in our discipleship challenges, you know, of other people, but also God is dealing with our own heart. To develop that compassionate response that embraces grace and truth at the same time. Now, I'm getting into a space where I say, you have to be in a place out of that compassion where you express the truth of how you feel about that, but from a place of grace, from a place of gentleness, so that in your anger you don't even throw petrol already in this burning fire.
Sure.
Move in the opposite spirit. Don't give this person what they deserve, because you also were given what you did not deserve. They are actually reacting to something, and then the challenge for you and me is to choose also not to react, but to respond.
Yeah.
And in so doing, you're moving in an opposite spirit in this space here. And then you give grace for the harshness that is coming your way. Jesus in pain of the cross, and then feeling this excruciating pain, he speaks forgiveness, says, Father, forgive them, in pain. So while I'm going through this, I'm moving in the opposite spirit. And then what happens? For the goal set before him, which is a relationship with God and ourselves, what happened is that Jesus won our hearts, and then is still winning the hearts of others, as showing us an example also of how to live in hostile environment. We do not allow evil to overcome us. We overcome evil with good, not allowing evil to overcome us, but we overcome evil with good. And that good expressed in those situations is actually decided by the quality of my relationship with the Lord. It's amazing how people out of reaction have even turned their backs to church and don't want anything to do with God. They are offended with God. They have offended. It's like my son, when I speak with him, and then he thinks when he says please, he's going to get anything that he wants.
Sure.
But when I say no, for him now, that is injustice because he's done the right thing. He said please. But I said, maybe not now, Joshua. And then Joshua says, I don't like you, Dad. He's throwing a tantrum. We do that to God. We throw a tantrum. We want to give up on him and go and do our own way, because ons is heartful now, says, listen, goodbye. And then later on, the very same Joshua comes back and says, Daddy, I love you very much. It's us. I see myself in my son towards me. That's who I am towards God. But we've got to, from that place of ventilating those feelings and whatsoever, we come back to God and says, I trust you. You are my Father. And this person has treated me this way. I choose to forgive them and let the healing of God come. And then he will give you wisdom how to take the next step. There is no cookie cutter for all of us, because people have got different ways of thinking and personalities. People have got different experiences, personal, historical experience. Some are painful. You know, they went through a whole lot. When they see anyone that look like me or you, it's like, hey, I'm going to be robbed. Hey, I'm going to be killed, and stuff like that, because of what they've gone through. So it's important to have a compassionate heart in terms of how we deal with these issues that we we involved him in the situation that we are going through. That's where the miracle happened. If I had permission, I would tell many stories of these people who have now won over those parents, and those parents have seen God in them, and they are now in a deep relationship with God, as if nothing something of that sort never actually happened, because of moving in an opposite spirit with compassion, where grace and truth is held in tension. That's it.
Thank you so much, Sihle. That was awesome. I thought I was enriched, in a sense that I think the whole thing of iLobolo, if you are listening and you are wrestling with that stuff, I hope you have found new tools. And I think the biggest tool is never forget compassion. Don't forget to be compassionate, even in very hostile and very trying situations. And let's also just rediscover the purpose of when we say iLobolo is not entirely a bad thing. Let us be reminded of the reason why it was there to begin with. It was there to build relationship. It's not there to fatten somebody's bank account and to condemn others to perpetual debt, but it was more about relationships. Be that as it may, it is distorted, and we are living in a very distorted world. Let us progress and trudge ahead with compassion, always walking humbly before God,
Yes.
and pleading our case, and ultimately God will fight your battles. Having said that, next week we are with Pastor Alexander Fenter, an amazing
Great
guy.
Yes.
An amazing guy who's going to help us with human sexuality. We're going to be talking about LGBTQI. What do we do in the church? Do we accept an LGBTQI member in the congregation? What is LGBTQI? What does the Bible say about human sexuality? What is God calling us? And I know it's a thorny subject, it's a tricky one, and we're going to dip our finger in it, trusting that God's grace will see us through. And please don't cancel us. I can only promise you one thing: it's going to be highly charged. There's going to be a lot of grace. It's going to be enriching. It's going to be contextual and appropriate and relevant for us in our context. With those words, I want to say to you, Sa Laniga. Until next time, cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.